We are taught that history is black and white, good versus evil, democracy versus tyranny. But what if the line wasn't drawn in the sand? What if it was drawn on a balance sheet? While soldiers fought on the beaches, American corporations were fighting for market share inside Nazi Germany. Ford, General Motors, IBM, Chase, names that built the American dream, also built the Third Reich's war machine. This isn't a conspiracy theory found in the dark corners of the internet. This is a history of corporate complicity, backed by federal records. They funded the enemy. They profited from the destruction. And when the smoke cleared, they kept the money. Wall Street and Nazi funding weren't accidents. It was a business model, a shocking paradox of profits from war. The system that allowed this didn't disappear in 1945. It just got an upgrade. Prepare to see the receipts, the memos, the undeniable truth about American industry and the Nazis. Welcome to the untold story of corporate complicity. This is what they didn't teach you in school.
What if the people who defeated Hitler also funded him? Not through some backroom deal you've never heard of, through institutions you bank with. Right now, Ford, General Motors, IBM, Chase, names that built America, also built the Third Reich. You were taught World War II was good versus evil, democracy fighting fascism. But here's what they didn't tell you in school. The tanks rolling into Poland, made in Detroit, the planes bombing London, fueled by American oil, the system that identified Jews for extermination, designed in New York. This wasn't an accident. It was a business model. While your grandparents were sacrificing everything to stop tyranny, Wall Street was making sure the war machine on the other side stayed running, and the men who profited, some of their names are still on buildings, still on your stock portfolio, still in power. By the end of this video, you'll never look at American banking the same way again. Because what I'm about to show you isn't conspiracy, it's documentation, Senate hearings, seized assets, corporate memos. The question isn't whether this happened. The question is why you were never told. Look, videos like this don't survive on ad revenue alone. The algorithm doesn't reward content that names names. That connects dots. That shows you the receipts. If this information resonates with you, if it feels like truth you weren't supposed to find, hit that like button, subscribe, because that's how we keep this visible. And I need to know something. Comment below and tell me the truth. Did you learn any of this in school? Did anyone ever mention Prescott Bush in the same sentence as Nazi Germany? Did they tell you IBM had a role in the Holocaust? Or is this the first time you're hearing these names? In this context, because if it is, you need to ask yourself why. To understand how this happened, you need to see the trap being set. Germany in the 1920s wasn't just broke, it was humiliated. The Treaty of Versailles didn't just end the war. It crushed an entire nation. Hyperinflation so extreme that people used wheelbarrows of cash to buy bread. A life savings that took decades to build, gone in a week. Imagine being a father in 1923 Berlin. You wake up, your money from yesterday buys nothing today. Your children are hungry, your wife is terrified. The middle class, erased. But Wall Street didn't see a tragedy, they saw opportunity. In 1924, American bankers engineered something called the Dawes Plan. Officially, it was a rescue mission, humanitarian aid to stabilize Europe and prevent another war. Noble, right? But here's what it really was. A debt trap, a financial leash. Here's how the game worked. Wall Street loaned millions of dollars to Germany. Germany used that money to pay reparations to France and Britain. France and Britain then paid their war debts back to the United States. It was a perfect circle. Money flowed from New York to Berlin to Paris to London, and right back to New York. Everyone at the top got their cut. Bankers on both sides of the Atlantic got rich, except the German people. They stayed broke. The loans came with strings. American banks didn't just hand over cash. They installed their people in German ministries. They monitored the budgets. They controlled the railroads. the industrial output, the exports. Germany was sovereign, in name only. And then 1929 hit, the Wall Street crash. And just like that, the money stopped. The loans dried up, American banks pulled back, and Germany, it collapsed. Again. Unemployment exploded, 6 million people out of work, desperation everywhere, rage boiling over in the streets, and into that chaos walked Adolf Hitler, promising jobs, promising order, promising to make Germany powerful again. Now here's the part they don't tell you in school. This wasn't an accident, it was engineered. The man who made it all possible, Hjalmar Schacht. You won't find his name in most history books, but you should. He was the financial architect of the Third Reich, Reichsbank president, economics minister, the wizard who turned a bankrupt nation into a war machine in less than 6 years. Schacht knew he couldn't rearm Germany legally. The Treaty of Versailles explicitly forbade it. The world was watching, inspectors were monitoring, so he did what bankers do best. He innovated. He invented mefo bills, a shadow currency, fake money issued by a shell company that existed only on paper. The company was called Metallurgische Forschungsgesellschaft. Sounds like a mouthful, right? In English, Metalworking Research Corporation. Boring, bureaucratic, forgettable. That was the point. MEFO bills allowed the Nazi government to hide billions in military spending. They printed money that didn't officially exist, to buy tanks that officially weren't being built, to fund an army that officially didn't exist. And the genius part? The bills were guaranteed by the German government itself, which meant every major bank in Europe and America accepted them as legitimate. The Reichsbank would issue the bills. German armament companies would accept them as payment. Then those companies would take the bills to commercial banks and exchange them for real cash. The banks didn't ask questions. Why would they? It was guaranteed money. By 1939, there were 12 billion Reichsmarks worth of mefo bills in circulation. 12 billion. That's the entire rearmament budget, hidden in plain sight. And Wall Street? They knew. Intelligence agencies knew. The Bank for International Settlements in Switzerland definitely knew. But nobody stopped it. Why? Because while Hitler was secretly rearming, American corporations were making a fortune. The Nazis offered something no other government could: stability, order, crushed labor unions, no strikes, no protests, no regulation, and a guaranteed, massive, state-funded industrial boom. It was a Faustian bargain. Profit, in exchange for looking the other way. And American corporations, they signed in blood. Now write this in the comments if you're starting to see the pattern. Write, I see the pattern. Because what comes next gets darker. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because understanding the financial trap is one thing, but understanding who built the machine, that's where it gets personal. This wasn't some abstract economic policy. This was American companies, household names, brands you trust, corporations that are still operating today. Let's start with IBM. In 1933, the Nazis needed to solve a problem. They wanted to identify every Jew in Germany, every single one. But how do you track millions of people across an entire country? How do you know who lives where, who owns what, who needs to be removed? Enter IBM. They didn't just sell machines to the Nazis, they leased them, which meant IBM maintained control. They sent engineers to service the machines, they updated the software, they trained the operators. This wasn't a one-time sale, it was an ongoing partnership. The technology was called Hollerith machines, punch card systems. You've probably seen them in old movies. Little cards with holes punched in specific patterns, primitive by today's standards. But in the 1930s, it was cutting-edge data processing. The Nazis used it to conduct the 1933 census. But this wasn't a normal census. It asked one question that previous censuses never had: religion. Specifically, are you Jewish? IBM's German subsidiary, Dehomag, designed the codes. Column 22, religion. Code 3 meant Jew. Think about that for a second. An American corporation created the system that allowed the Nazis to identify their victims with industrial efficiency. The Holocaust didn't just happen because of hatred. It happened because someone made it logistically possible. And IBM knew. Corporate headquarters in New York knew. There are memos. There's correspondence. They knew exactly what their machines were being used for, and they kept servicing them, kept upgrading them, kept billing for them. Even after the war started, even after the camps opened, IBM's Swiss office coordinated shipments of parts and paper to Germany throughout the entire war. Punch cards don't work without paper, and the paper came from IBM. Some executives knew, some pretended not to know, some didn't care. But let me show you something even worse. Standard Oil, you know them today as Exxon. In the 1930s, Standard Oil formed a partnership with IG Farben, the largest chemical company in Germany. Together, they shared patents, they shared technology, they built a cartel to control the global oil and chemical markets. And here's what Standard Oil gave them. Tetraethyl lead. You've probably never heard of it. But without it, the Luftwaffe doesn't fly, literally. Tetraethyl lead is a gasoline additive that prevents engine knocking in high-performance aircraft. German planes needed it, and they couldn't produce it themselves. So Standard Oil gave them the formula. They did more than that. They helped IG Farben build the production facilities. American engineers flew to Germany. They supervised construction. They trained the workers. And when the war started, those facilities kept running. Here's the kicker. While American pilots were rationing fuel, while families back home couldn't drive because of rubber shortages, Standard Oil was helping Nazi Germany stay in the air. But it gets darker. IG Farben didn't just make fuel additives. They made Zyklon B, the gas used in the chambers at Auschwitz, and they built a factory right next to the camp to use slave labor. 25,000 people worked to death, starved, beaten, murdered for profit. And Standard Oil's partner, IG Farben, ran that factory. Now I know what you're thinking. Maybe the American executives didn't know. Maybe they were just doing business and had no idea what was happening on the ground. But that's not true. Intelligence reports were sent to Washington. Journalists wrote about it. Diplomats saw it with their own eyes. The information was available. The choice was made anyway. Profit over people. If you're still watching, if this is making you angry, comment below. Profit over people. Because we're not done. The money trail goes even higher. Let's talk about the real cost. Not in morality, not in principles, in blood and steel. By 1939, American subsidiaries weren't just doing business in Germany. They were the pillars of the Nazi war machine. Ford Werke, General Motors Opel division. These weren't minor operations. They were the largest producers of military trucks in the Third Reich. Let me put this in perspective for you. The invasion of Poland, September 1st, 1939. The blitzkrieg that shocked the world. Fast, brutal, mechanized warfare like nothing anyone had ever seen. Tanks rolling across borders, troops moving at unprecedented speed. You know what made that possible? Trucks, tens of thousands of them, and the majority were built by American companies. General Motors' Opel plant produced the Blitz truck, literally called the Lightning. It became the backbone of German logistics. Ford Werke produced similar models. These weren't civilian vehicles converted for military use. They were designed from the ground up as military transports. And here's the part that should make your blood boil. US military intelligence knew this. There are reports from 1938 and 1939 stating clearly that the invasion of Poland and France would be logistically impossible without the production capacity of Ford and GM's German subsidiaries. Impossible. Which means, without Detroit, there's no blitzkrieg, no rapid conquest of Europe, no World War II as we know it. And where were the executives during all this? Henry Ford received the Grand Cross of the German Eagle in 1938. The highest honor Nazi Germany could give to a foreigner. He accepted it, displayed it proudly. James Mooney, GM's head of overseas operations, also received the same medal. Same year. Now fast forward to 1941. America enters the war. Pearl Harbor. Suddenly, we're fighting Germany. Our boys are shipping out. Families are sacrificing. Rationing gas, rationing rubber, rationing food. And what happened to those factories? Ford, Werk, and Opel? They kept running, under German control, yes, but still producing, still making trucks that carried German soldiers, still making engines that powered the Wehrmacht. And after the war, Ford and GM filed claims with the US government. They said their factories had been damaged by Allied bombing. They wanted compensation, and they got it. Millions of dollars, paid by American taxpayers, for damage done to factories that had been building Nazi war machines. Let that sink in for a second. You paid to rebuild the factories. That helped kill American soldiers. But the darkest cost? That's not measured in trucks. It's measured in lives, human lives. IG Farben, the partner of Standard Oil, didn't just make fuel and chemicals. They built a factory at Auschwitz. Auschwitz III, also called Monowitz. The purpose? Synthetic rubber and fuel production using slave labor from the camp. 25,000 people were worked to death there. Starved, beaten, frozen, murdered when they could no longer work. The average life expectancy of a laborer at Monowitz was 3 months. 3 months. IG Farben paid the SS for each worker, 4 Reichsmarks per day for skilled labor, 3 for unskilled, women and children. 1.5. You read that right. They rented human beings from the SS and worked them to death for profit. And American companies? They didn't just partner with IG Farben before the war. After the war, they absorbed them. BASF, Bayer, Agfa. These are IG Farben's successor companies, and they're still operating today. The profits from those partnerships weren't just dirty, they were stained with blood. American oil kept the Luftwaffe in the air. American trucks carried the Wehrmacht across Europe. American technology identified the victims, and American investors got paid. While your grandfather was storming Normandy, while your grandmother was working in a factory making bandages and bullets, Wall Street was making sure the enemy stayed armed. Now here's what I want you to do. If this makes you feel sick, if you're angry, if you're wondering how this was legal, comment below. I see the cost, because we're about to name names. Now let's talk about the men at the top, the ones who made the decisions, the ones who signed the contracts, the ones who profited. Because this wasn't some faceless corporate machine. Real people made real choices, and some of those names you're going to recognize. First, Prescott Bush, father of one president, grandfather of another. In the 1930s, he was a director at the Union Banking Corporation in New York. UBC. Sounds boring, right? Just another bank. But here's what UBC really was. A front. UBC was the American financial arm of Fritz Thyssen, German steel magnate, one of Hitler's earliest and most powerful backers. Thyssen didn't just support the Nazis politically. He funded them. His steel empire built the tanks, the ships, the weapons, and Prescott Bush helped manage his American assets. In 1942, the US government seized UBC under the Trading with the Enemy Act. That's not speculation. That's federal record. The US government literally classified UBC as an enemy asset. Think about the timing. 1942. American soldiers are dying in the Pacific. Families are rationing. Kids are collecting scrap metal for the war effort. And a bank in New York, run by the father of a future president, is protecting Nazi steel money. Prescott Bush wasn't arrested, wasn't charged. The assets were seized, held in trust. And after the war, returned. With interest. He made money. From Hitler's banker. Then, there's Chase National Bank. You know them today as J.P. Morgan Chase, one of the largest banks in the world. But in the 1930s and 40s, they were running a scheme so vile, it's almost hard to believe. They sold something called Rückwanderer marks, discounted German currency, marks you could buy in the US for cheap and use in Germany at full value. Sounds like a good deal, right? Here's the catch. Where did those discounted marks come from? Jewish refugees. When Jews fled Germany, they had to leave everything behind. The Nazis seized their homes, their businesses, their bank accounts, everything. And then, they sold those seized assets, at a discount, to foreign banks. Chase bought them, repackaged them, and sold them to Nazi sympathizers in the United States. Let me say that again. Chase National Bank sold currency, stolen from Holocaust victims, to Americans who wanted to visit or do business in Nazi Germany. But it gets worse. When Germany invaded France in 1940, most banks shut down their Paris branches. Too risky, too dangerous. But not Chase. They stayed open, and they cooperated. The Nazis demanded that Chase freeze Jewish accounts, and Chase complied. French citizens with Jewish heritage had their life savings frozen. They couldn't access their own money, couldn't flee, couldn't survive. And Chase? They kept operating, kept making money. There's a memo, written by a Chase executive in Paris. It said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that they were following German regulations to maintain good relationships with the authorities. Good relationships with the Nazis. Now let me take you even higher, above the banks, above the corporations, to the institution that facilitated all of it, the Bank for International Settlements, BIS, based in Basel, Switzerland. You've probably never heard of it. Most people haven't, but it's the central bank for central banks, the place where the financial elites of the world meet, in private. And during World War II, it was a club, a neutral space where American, British, and German bankers sat at the same table while their countries were at war. The BIS moved Nazi gold looted from the central banks of Belgium, Holland, Czechoslovakia, gold melted down from the teeth and jewelry of concentration camp victims. They laundered it, legitimized it, helped the Nazis convert stolen assets into currency they could use to buy weapons and supplies from neutral countries. And the president of the BIS? An American, Thomas McKittrick. He met with Nazi officials throughout the war. He protected German assets. And when the war ended, he returned to the United States. No charges, no investigation. The BIS still exists today, still operating, still making decisions that affect the global economy. This wasn't a few rogue actors. This was the system, the structure. Wall Street and Berlin weren't enemies. They were business partners. And the ideology that justified it? Business as usual. Profit first. Morality. It's optional. If you're starting to see how the machine really works, comment, the system is the fraud. Because now, we need to talk about what you can do. So here's the question you should be asking right now. Why does this matter to me? Why does something that happened 80 years ago affect my life today? Because the system didn't change, it just upgraded. The business as usual ideology that justified trading with the enemy in the 1940s. It's the same logic driving decisions right now. Same banks, same priorities, different war. Let me make this personal. You have a 401k, a retirement account, maybe a mutual fund. You probably don't know what's in it. Most people don't. They just trust the fund manager to make it grow. But here's what you need to understand. Your money is working right now. It's invested somewhere, in something. And if you don't choose where it goes, someone else will. And they will choose profit. Not ethics, not morality, not human rights. Profit. Your retirement fund could be invested in private prisons, in weapons manufacturers selling to authoritarian regimes, in companies using child labor or destroying the environment. You don't know, because you never asked, and that's by design. The system relies on your ignorance. It relies on you being too busy, too tired, too trusting to look under the hood. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. So what do? First, audit where your money sleeps. Pull up your 401k. Look at the holdings. Google the companies. See what they actually do. Not what they say they do in commercials. What they actually do. If you find something you don't like, you have options. You can reallocate. Most plans let you choose different funds. Look for ESG funds. Environmental, social, governance. They're not perfect, but they're a start. Second, demand transparency from your bank. Ask them directly. Where is my money being lent? What industries are you financing? What regimes are you doing business with? Most banks won't want to answer. They'll give you vague corporate language, but the act of asking matters. It tells them people are paying attention. Third, vote with your wallet. Every single day. You think consumer boycotts don't work? Look at history. In the 1930s, there was a movement to boycott German goods. It didn't stop the war, but it raised awareness. It put pressure on corporations. Today, you have more power than ever. You can research a company in 30 seconds. You can choose where to shop, where to bank, where to invest. And when enough people make that choice, corporations listen. Not because they care, but because they have to. Fourth, stop being naive. This is the hardest one, because it requires you to let go of a comforting lie. The lie that the people in charge have your best interests at heart, that the system is fundamentally good, that bad things only happen because of a few bad actors. That's not true. The system is designed to extract, to profit, to grow at any cost. And if you're not paying attention, you're the cost. But here's the thing. You're awake now. You see it. And once you see it, you can't go back to sleep. You don't have to overthrow the system tomorrow. You don't have to quit your job and become an activist. But you do have to stop being passive. Follow the money. Ask the questions. Make the uncomfortable choices. Because the same banks that funded the Third Reich, they're still here. Still making decisions. Still choosing profit over people. And if we don't hold them accountable, who will? Now, if you're still with me, if this resonates, if you're ready to stop being a passenger in your own financial life, comment below, I'm awake. Because what comes next is for the people who stayed. If you made it this far, it wasn't by accident. Most people clicked away in the first 2 minutes. They didn't want to know. They couldn't handle the discomfort. Because the truth about where power really sits, about who profits from war, about the systems we trust, is ugly. But you stayed. That tells me something about you. You're not looking for easy answers. You're not here to be entertained. You're here because you want to understand how the machine really works. And now you do. You've seen the names, the banks, the corporations, the men at the top who chose profit over principle, over lives. You've seen the receipts, the seized assets, the Senate hearings, the memos. This isn't conspiracy. This is documentation. And now that you know, you can't unknow it. You can't go back to thinking the system is broken by accident. You can't pretend the people in charge don't know what they're doing. They know. They've always known. So here's what I need from you. If you believe this information matters, if you think people deserve to know where the money really flows, subscribe. Not for me, for the mission. Because channels that expose these systems don't get recommended. They get buried. The algorithm doesn't reward this. So your subscription, your like, that's how this stays visible. And I need to know you were here. Comment below. I see the machine. 3 words. That's it. So I know the right people are watching. Now, if you want to understand how this connects to today, how these same banks operate in the shadows right now. The video you need to watch next is right here. It's about the Federal Reserve, how it was created, who controls it, and why your dollar isn't really yours. This is the next piece of the puzzle. I'll see you there.